and welcome to the DEFCON Warning System Digest. I'm Tom Longlywolf, the director of the DEFCON Warning System. This is probably the last time you're going to see me with, like longish hair for a boy. My wife is making me get my hair cut tomorrow. It's, she hates me in long hair. I used to work for Disneyland, and they made us keep our hair like really, really short. And wherever since I retired from there, I kind of like grow it long, especially because I hate my ears. But she doesn't like it long, so I'm getting it cut tomorrow. That's okay. I like her in long hair. She doesn't like long hair, but I like long hair. And when I say long hair, I mean Crystal Gale length long hair. And she won't have that, but she does kind of grow it long for me. So there's that compromise. I keep my hair short for her. She keeps her hair long for me. But anyway, nobody cares about my life. So we're here for the DEFCON Warning System Digest. Now, this digest that we're doing today is actually not the one that we plan to do. The one we plan to do is going to talk about DEFCON Warning System and its mission, but something came up recently in Russia that kind of caught our attention, so we want to bring this to you and talk about it. This was a paper that was published by Sergei Karagonov. I'm probably horribly mispronouncing that name, and that's probably not going to be the first name I mess up. But this guy was he's an honorary chairman of Russia's Council on Foreign Defense Policy, academic supervisor, School of International Economics and Foreign Affairs, Higher School of Economics in Moscow. What's more important is that he was an advisor to, I believe it was Yeltsin and Vladimir Putin. So this guy kind of has the ear of the leader of Russia, and he put out a paper that expressed his opinion on why using nuclear weapons could save humanity from a global catastrophe. Basically, he's advocating that Russia use nuclear weapons. And, there's a lot of people in Russia that are advocating for the use of nuclear weapons. If you look at some of Russian media, you'll see that they, they're all kind of like, ready to drop the bomb on Kiev or maybe some NATO bases in order to, get NATO to back off of the Ukraine war.
Я на самом деле Посейдон сейчас испытал.
На чем?
На Англии.
Хорошо,
Я бы нет, при том как? Нет, совершенно я не предлагаю.
Зачем Шотландию?
Нет, сейчас. Я не предлагаю там взять и островок затопить. Нет, слушайте, во-первых, ограниченный заряд Посейдона достаточно для уничтожения групп.
Who cares what these media guys, think? It gets the ratings. It plays to the, what the government wants them to say. But this guy, because he has Vladimir Putin's ear, and also because the way he writes pretty much parallels what Vladimir Putin has talked about in interviews and the statements he's made and things like this, his paper pretty much spells out what Vladimir Putin either has said or is thinking. So we're not going to delve into the paper itself. You can read the paper on the DEFCON Warning System website. If you don't want to read it from us, you can find it on Russia Today. You can find it on some other sites. You could just Google if you want to. But it's there on the DEFCON site. What we felt was important is something that a lot of people are missing in this war in Ukraine, and that is how each side sees each other. We all go into this war saying, send a bunch of guys to the slaughter, and it's Vladimir Putin versus the West and things like that. But why is this war so important for Russia? Why is it so important for Vladimir Putin? And why is it so important for Joe Biden? Why is it important for NATO? Why is it important for the European Union and everybody like that? That's the thing that people are missing in this war. Why people are doing what they're doing. Now, we see, what the headlines talk about, what they say at their public pulpit, that we want to, Russia says we want to stop the West from taking over more of Europe, stop the West from its empire building, and the United States says, we want to stop Russia from, growing their empire. That's all the fun stuff that they say publicly. What we want to look at is why these people are really doing what they want to do. And that requires a bit of a psychoanalysis of each of the players in there. So we're going to take just a short amount of time. This is not going to be an hour-long digest or anything like that. We're going to hit some important points so you can understand why they are doing what they are doing, why Russia is invading Ukraine, why the United States and the West are pouring so many resources into Ukraine beyond the public statements they are making. This is what they are actually thinking. So, as far as Russia is concerned, now see, we've talked about this in past digests, that Russia, after being invaded, so many times, Napoleon, Germany, things like that, they've got like a big bullseye on the back, big invade here sign on their doorstep. So they're really paranoid about being invaded. So that does play into the whole idea of, they want to keep the West away. They see the West building their quote-unquote empire and moving closer and closer to Russia's doorstep. And so this plays right into their paranoia. So it's no surprising that they're reacting the way they do, because they've been invaded so many times, they're just frightened of it happening again. And there's other reasons that are going on for that too. They see that the West, especially the United States, is an adversary that seeks to weaken Russia and undermine its sovereignty. So the United States just encroaches in Eastern Europe. They had this nice buffer zone, the Warsaw Pact, which was designed solely, Russia complains that, Ukraine is, just a battleground for the West to occupy Russia, and that's exactly what the Warsaw countries were for Russia when Warsaw existed. They were the stomping ground, the battlefield for NATO and Warsaw to go at it so it doesn't come on Russia's doorstep. This plays right into the United States policy of fighting the war over there instead of on their territory. So that's why the United States spends a lot of resources and time making sure that any battle between Russia and the United States takes place in Europe to keep it out of the United States. Selfish? Yeah, sure is. It's exactly what Russia did. So you Europeans are the battlefield. I hate to break this to you. The United States is using you as a battlefield. Russia is using you as a battlefield. Get used to that idea. So they see the United States being an empire builder, wanting to, expand their empire into Europe. And they also see that the United States wants to weaken Russia because Russia sees itself as a superpower, and that the United States wants to be the lone superpower. Therefore, they must weaken Russia so the United States can be the lone world superpower. And also they see that the United States wants to infringe on its sovereignty. Now, remember, Russia has said, Ukraine is part of Russia. Not really. Even they don't believe that line. But they see all these areas around Europe that, they see as Russia, or maybe not so much as Russia, but area of influence that belongs to Russia. Same thing the United States does. The area in the Pacific and the Atlantic around the United States is their area of influence. Now, Western Europe is the area of influence of Russia. We looked this over in China. China has their area of influence that they want, including South China Sea, Taiwan, the Asian countries. Now they're kind of going all the way down to Australia. So they see that as their area of influence, their sphere of influence. So Russia sees this big area in Eastern Europe as their sphere of influence, their territory. And when the United States started moving into that area, especially after the fall of the Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact, when the United States just started marching into that area, they saw it as an infringement on their sovereignty. So this is something else that's playing into them. They see the United States wants to weaken Russia, and they see the United States basically muscling into the territory that they believe belongs to them. They accuse the West of trying to encircle Russia with military bases, missile defense systems. The United States has done this. They've done this since the Cold War. We all remember the Cuban Missile Crisis with those Jupiter 2 missiles in Turkey, which kind of, ticked Russia off. So that's why Russia moved the missiles down to Cuba. You know, if the United States is going to have missiles that close to Russia, Russia should have missiles that close to the United States. The United States, you know, starts moving into, you know, Poland and Ukraine and Romania and all these countries that, you know, surround Russia. Well, Russia sees themselves naturally being surrounded. You know, how would the United States feel if Russia moved into Cuba? Now, they're all kind of already there, but, you know, not like they were back in the Soviet times. But, you know, what if Russia started moving military stuff into Cuba? What if Russia started making alliances with Mexico or Canada? Let's just start throwing theoretical things out there. Or, you know, let's not be ridiculous, and let's start moving down to Venezuela, which they are, or Argentina, or Guatemala, or any other Central American country where, you know, a nice little base might, you know, be fun for, you know, Russia to have out there. How would the United States feel about that? Russia in coming into their area of influence again. So Russia feels surrounded by what it sees as a legitimate enemy. And the United States, they accuse supporting anti-Russian forces in a country like Ukraine. We all remember they blame the United States for supporting a coup against Russia. Ukraine's former president, Viktor, I'm going to blow this name, I'm reading it, Yanukovych, Viktor Yanukovych, in 2014. There was an election there. Russia accused the United States of influencing the election, of a fraudulent election. So they believe that they believe that a coup took place, and so now here's another country that fell to the United States. They say that the West, the United States, is using the springboard to invade and destroy Russia. Now, of course, the United States has no interest in invading and destroying Russia. But the problem is Russians don't see that. We always have to look at things from how the other guy sees it. If we want to understand why they're doing what they're doing, we have to look at things as how they interpret. It doesn't matter whether we agree with their interpretation. That's important. So let me say that again. It doesn't matter if we agree with their interpretation of events. We have to understand that. We have to accept that that's the way they think, and we have to understand why they're thinking that. Remember, big bullseye on them, big invade here sign on their property line. The United States is backing Ukraine in this war. And now this noise about Ukraine joining NATO. So now you got another NATO country smack on the border of Russia. How are they going to interpret that? If Canada joined the Warsaw Pact during the Cold War, how would the United States interpret that? Let's understand how they see things. Russia feels the West is against Russia, bordering on the paranoia. They are paranoid. Russia is paranoid. But the problem is they've got a legitimate complaint. There's that line in Crimson Tide, you know, when the coup happened, or God, it's been a long time since I've seen that movie, but, you know, the captain said, you know, this guy who's threatening the West with nuclear weapons, he's got a serious weed up his butt and a legitimate complaint. And Russia's got a legitimate complaint.
Seems to have a serious weed up his ass and a legitimate gripe.
They say that the United States is surrounding Russia. The United States is surrounding Russia. They're saying that that is the West is trying to weaken Russia. Well, yeah, they are trying to weaken Russia. They've actually, you know, they've said this pretty much so much, you know, and plus now there are these sanctions on them. How else is Russia going to interpret that? Russia sees them as being oppressed by the West, that they're a great power that is being held down. The worst event that happened to them was Gorbachev and the breaking up of the Soviet Union. I know, and I love making this quote that Putin once said. Vladimir Putin himself once said that anyone who misses the old Soviet Union has no heart, but anyone who wants it back has no brain. Now, he said this many, many years ago, and I'm not so sure he actually agrees with that statement anymore. Donald Trump once said that, the Vladimir Putin of today is not the Vladimir Putin that he used to know 10 years ago or 8 years ago or even 6 years ago. The Putin has changed. And now you take this even further, that Russia claims conflict with the West as a religious struggle with God on their side. Vladimir Putin has made many religious arguments that this struggle is right against wrong, that Jesus is on his side, that God is on his side. Now, how much Putin believes this is up for debate. Religion is often used to sell conflict, so, I don't know. He's used religious artifacts in his war. He sent one to the Russian Orthodox Church, possibly as an icon, kind of like how Israel used the Ark of the Covenant. They used to send the Ark of the Covenant before them in battle, and God would go before them and destroy the enemy. So he was using that probably as a symbol. So Vladimir Putin is using religion. I kind of hesitate to say that he thinks that he believes God is on his side. He's certainly using God to stoke the masses, to sell this to the people. Whether he actually believes it or not, I don't know. We see a lot of politicians, use religion. I'm going to get a little political for just a second. But let me say that, Hillary Clinton has used religion for her campaign, even though I believe she's just an outright atheist. Nancy Pelosi has done the same thing. I think she's an agnostic, actually. Same thing with Barack Obama. I believe he's an agnostic. But you can see how religion, and let me go to the other side. Trump has used religion. He's cuddled up to the Christian, conservative Christian side of the United States, and Trump is not a Christian, not in any sense of the word. So, both sides use it. People use religion all the time, and that's what Putin is doing. So this is what we have. This is how Russia is thinking. They see the United States as an adversary trying to weaken Russia and undermine its sovereignty. The West is trying to encircle Russia with things that are missile defense systems and to try and destroy them, nuclear weapons and things like that. The West is trying to use Ukraine in order to get up to their border as a springboard to invade and destroy Russia. They're paranoid, but they've got a legitimate argument. They see themselves as oppressed by the West, and they believe that, hey, God is on their side. When God's on your side, you can do no wrong. Now, the problem with the West not understanding Russia, that's the same problem that Russia has with the West. They don't understand why the West is going against them, other than the West is just a monster. So if there are any Russians watching this, I know we have Ukrainians watching this. I know we do have some Russians watching this. So if anyone in the government is watching this, probably not. Why would the Russian government watch us? What do we know? We've only been studying nuclear war for 40 plus years. So one point I did forget about Russia, and I think this point actually applies to both sides. So maybe it's a good thing that I'm bringing it up now when I'm just about to bridge between Russia and the United States. Russia believes that a limited nuclear war can be fought and won under the right circumstances. That the fear of nuclear use can frighten off the West. Will Russia actually use a nuclear weapon? Well, depends on what they're trying to defend against. There's a lot of people out there, a lot of experts who don't think that Russia would cross that line, that the world would just react too harshly, that if Russia thinks it's under sanctions now, just wait until they blow off a nuclear weapon. But Russia has made it very clear that there are red lines now. Now they have put out red lines, and Ukraine and the West has just jumped over those red lines, and nothing has happened. But there are real red lines, and we believe that Crimea, and especially the warm water port, is that red line, that they will use nuclear weapons to defend against that, because goodness knows they need that warm water port. It's the only warm water port Russia has. And that is what started this whole thing. As soon as Ukraine jumped from having a Russian supporter in the government to having a Western supporter in the government, they lost that warm water port. They didn't actually lose it. They still had it, but the fear of losing it is what sparked the invasion of Ukraine. That's what it was. It had nothing to do with, well, it had something to do with Ukraine switching over to the west side, but it was, gosh darn, that warm water port. That's what they want. That's what they need. They have to have that. So when it comes to nuclear war, yeah, if NATO was to cross the border and start attacking, sending soldiers into Russia, yeah, they might, fire off a few tactical battlefield nuclear weapons. But that warm water port in Crimea, yeah, they will. Have no doubt in your mind. If Ukraine is going to take that, expect a mushroom cloud. It's going to happen. I guarantee it. I will bet the house on that one. The problem is, the West also is starting to believe that a limited nuclear war can be fought and won under the right circumstances. What those circumstances are, will the United States use nuclear weapons in the Ukraine war? No. There's no reason for them to. If Russia starts popping off nuclear weapons, then who knows? If they start nuking NATO bases like what is being proposed by some of these people in Russia, including this Sergei Karagovich that I was talking about, maybe. But even if Ukraine was to be, even if all of Ukraine were to fall, if Russia was to send out 5 million troops to blitzkrieg across the border, to orc across the border, and just take over Ukraine, the United States, the West, would never use a nuclear weapon under those circumstances. Ukraine would just fall. That's the end of them. The United States is not using nuclear weapons over Ukraine. Not unless Russia does it first, and not unless they start bombing NATO targets, allied targets, targets that the United States is by treaty obligated to defend. Now, let me just caveat that for a second. If Russia were to pop off a nuclear weapon over Berlin, because that's the first NATO city I could think of, that does not necessarily mean that NATO has to respond with a nuclear weapon. The option is there, but they're not obligated to. So there's some confusion about that. Just because Russia uses a nuclear weapon, NATO is not obligated to respond with a nuclear weapon. So let's get that understood right now. They might, but they're not obligated to. So if Russia starts using nuclear weapons in Ukraine, that doesn't necessarily mean the United States is going to start using nuclear weapons. Even if a nuclear weapon was used in, say, Poland, because Poland is making noises about getting into the war, just because they're frightened of Russia, especially when Russia starts talking about, that they're not going to stop in Ukraine. They're going to keep going. So Poland's a little nervous about that. So even if Russia, Belarus, fires off a nuclear weapon into Poland, that doesn't necessarily mean a nuclear weapon is going to be used in response. Maybe, but doesn't mean it. So, okay, now we've talked about why Russia is doing what they're doing, what their mental status is. Now let's move over to the United States, especially for you Russians who are watching. Why is the United States so invested in Ukraine? Who cares about Ukraine? Why does the average New Yorker care about Ukraine? Why does Los Angeles care about Ukraine? Is Los Angeles willing to be bombed over Ukraine? No, they're not. But anyway, the thing is, and we put out an article about Joe Biden when he became president of the United States, 2 years ago. It was basically an analysis of what we can expect of him, what he was like, what his kind of thinking is. So if you want to look up that article, it's pretty informative. But basically what it says is Joe Biden is a child of the Cold War. He was born in 1942, he grew up during the Cuban Missile Crisis and the deep Cold War of the 60s, and 1970s. So he is of that mental state. I'm about 20 years younger than, I'm more than 20 years younger than Joe Biden. But I grew up in I still remember the 70s and the early 80s before the wall fell, and so I have that same kind of thinking. Joe Biden sees not Russia, but the Soviet Union. And so he's still thinking empires, he's still thinking Warsaw Pacts, he's still thinking nuclear war, the precipice of the nuclear war. He's still thinking of Russia swallowing up countries and things like that. He remembers, those old Soviet premiers that were before Gorbachev and Glasnost. He sees Russia as the Soviet Union looking to expand, which is exactly what they're doing. NATO's doing the same thing. They just expanded. So the Soviet Union is looking to, grab Ukraine, grab Belarus. How much longer before we see a coup in Belarus? How much longer before we see, that guy kicked out? Maybe not that guy, but the next guy. How much longer before we see a couple coups in some other countries? Biden does not believe that Putin should remain in power, and he's even said this. He says that Vladimir Putin should not remain in power, which means that Putin sees this as a personal conflict. This war is personal. He sees the United States as out to get him, not just Russia, but him himself. So that's where the United States is seeing Russia as. Russia is expansionist. Russia is going to take over countries through coup or fraudulent elections or just outright military means. That's how the United States is looking at Russia, an invader, somebody who's willing to poison and murder people. They see Vladimir Putin as a dictator who is willing to kill his opponents. They see Russia as Germany prior to World War II. How much appeasement can they give Russia before the entire world is engulfed in conflict? Now, like I said, whether you agree with what the United States is thinking about Russia doesn't matter. This is what the United States thinks. And as a Russian, this is the mentality you have to deal with. So you either are going to accept the United States as seeing Russia this way and try and find a way to deal with this, or go to war. So when you go to the negotiating table, you have to walk in there understanding that this is how the United States see Russia. And the only way you're going to be able to negotiate any kind of conflict resolution is you have to break down these perceptions that Russia has of the West. Because if you don't do that, there's no reason why Russia is going to back down, because they're just scared to death of the West. And there's no way that the West is going to back down from Russia, because the West is scared to death of Russia. They see each other as just the other guy willing to go to nuclear war over this. And so everybody is preparing themselves for this upcoming nuclear war. Russia needs more territory in order to buffer themselves against an invasion. The United States needs more allies, more land around Russia in order to keep Russia from just invading all of Europe and eventually, sending missiles to the United States. Well, this is how they see each other. So unless these people understand the way the other guy thinks, we're going to war. If it's not over Ukraine, it's going to be over something else. It's going to happen because everybody is paranoid of the other. Everybody sees the other guy as a monster. So that is our digest. That is the digest we wanted to get out to you, so you can understand what the other guy is thinking. If you're a Westerner, and most of our audience is from the West, this is what Russia is thinking. If you're from Russia or Belarus or anything like that, this is how the United States thinks about Russia. Agree with it or not, you can think they're wrong, but that's how they think, and you need to change the way they're thinking in order for there to be any peace. This DEFCON Warning System Digest is made possible by our sponsors, MSTG, Riff Raff, TK99, Torture, I can't even pronounce this one, UAM, CPLYR is, I don't even know if that's a real name, and William. If it wasn't for their generosity, we wouldn't be able to have the DEFCON warning system itself, and we wouldn't be able to do these digests. Please visit us at defconwarningsystem.com, where we post a lot of articles. We have resources for you in order to prepare in the event there is a nuclear war, as well as news and news about events analysis. And please come visit us on our community forum, community.defconwarningsystem.com, where you can actually interact with the staff. We love to talk to you. That's where we interact with. It's a lot easier than interacting on Twitter or Discord or anything like that. So please come visit us. We'd love to see you. In the meantime, I'm Tom Lonelywolf, Director of the DEFCON Warning System.